All right, everybody, and we are back on the back end of this doubleheader today discussing the NFC. And looking at this conference, I would definitely say the NFC it certainly has its highs and it definitely has its lows. Unlike the AFC, these teams are very much spread out. The teams at the top are starting to separate themselves from the pack by quite a bit, and the teams at the bottom are really just any week now they could be mathematically eliminated from the playoffs. So that's why we wanted to try to get this video out while excuse me, while every team is technically still alive in the playoff hunt. Although starting down here at the bottom like we did with the AFC, Carolina and Arizona, each with 10 losses under their belt already, will almost certainly not be competing in the NFC playoffs. And Carolina, this is a 1-10 start after they really tried to turn over a new leaf with Frank Reich and Bryce Young as their new head coach quarterback duo, although Frank Reich didn't even survive one season. He was fired after just 12 weeks at a 1-10 record. So that is a very short tenure for a National Football League head coach. And, we saw this last year with, well, not last year, I suppose, a couple of years back now with Urban Meyer in Jacksonville, where he didn't even make it a full season either. But yeah, Frank Reich, after not finishing last season with the Indianapolis Colts, now he doesn't finish this season with the Carolina Panthers. And definitely some rumors starting to come out of Charlotte that maybe owner Dave Tepper and Frank Reich didn't quite see eye to eye on what to do with the number one overall pick. Maybe Frank Reich wanted CJ Stroud, Tepper wanted Bryce Young, but that's all hearsay. The bottom line is Frank Reich is out. Bryce Young is struggling as a rookie quarterback, although still very young, no pun intended, still a very long way to go ahead of him. And this year was really sort of seen as something to build on, anyways. Granted, I'm sure Carolina's ownership, they wanted to compete for this wide open NFC South, as we'll see, but yeah, this just isn't going to be Carolina's year, most likely, unless they go on just some unbelievable tear down the stretch here that would start against Tampa Bay next year. And for Arizona, their first year head coach, Jonathan Gannon, started out a little spicy this year with upsets over the Cowboys. Well, upset, I guess I should say. They were close in a few games early in the season, though, but now they do sit at 2-10, and it looks like their season is all but over as well. Moving along here with the Commanders, Bears, and Giants, all at 4 wins. And yeah, at 4-8, these three teams are very much likely out of the playoff picture. Washington with an 0-5 record in the division, 2-7 in the conference. That's just not going to cut it. And Washington ended up selling at the trade deadline, getting rid of some of their explosive talent on the defensive side of the ball in the trenches. Um, and it really does seem like this might be Riverboat Ron's last stand as head coach down there in the nation's capital. And perhaps next year they bring in a new head coach. Maybe they keep Eric Bieniemy. Be interested to see, does the new head coach want to call plays? Does that mean Eric Bieniemy stays? Does he try to become a head coach somewhere now that he's been calling plays? But will another team want him after Washington went 4-8? I don't really know. So I guess we'll see. And time will tell. It always does. So be interested to see what happens with Washington, because I do think they have some good pieces to build around on that team, particularly on the offensive side of the football. Quite a stark contrast to just a couple of years back when it seemed like the defense was really what was going to be leading them going forward. And then Chicago with a 4-8 record. They've been doing better as of late, but definitely a very disappointing season for the Bears as well. The silver lining for the Bears, though, they will have the Carolina Panthers first round draft choice in the 2024 draft. So they could very well end up with the first overall pick as well as another top 10 pick by way of their own selection. And definitely interesting to see if they roll with Justin Fields. Do they draft a new quarterback? I guess we'll find out, but it would seem as of right now, Chicago is outside of the NFC playoff picture. And with the Giants, geez, where do you even start with this team? They're really just kind of stuck in the water, stuck in the mud right now, I guess I should say. Seems like no matter what this organization does, no matter what they try, they just can't escape mediocrity. And when things finally start to look like they're turning around last year, when they make the playoffs, they win a playoff round, maybe things are going to be better. Reality crashes in this year, and they're sitting here with a 4-8 record, with 5 weeks to go. Even at best, they're finishing at 9-8. Daniel Jones is lost for the season. The season's really just kind of fallen off the rails in general, and yeah, I really don't know where the Giants go from here. You can't fire Brian Daboll, right? Like, that would make no sense. You can't get rid of Daniel Jones because you just signed him to that massive extension. And Saquon Barkley's contract going to be up yet again. Do you try to tag him again? Do you try to sign him to a long-term deal? Do you try to flip him? Do you just let him walk? Not really sure how that situation gets resolved. So definitely a lot of question marks, some big question marks, if you will, in the Big Apple. Then moving along here, now with these next 11 teams, I would say everybody here is in the mix. They at least have a shot to make the playoffs realistically. And we'll start with the NFC South teams because I think for the Saints and Bucks, their only path into the playoffs is really going to be at this number 4 spot here with the division title, because this wild card race will be very contentious with these 4 teams here, and we'll talk about that in a second. But the Saints, the Bucks, and the Falcons, one of those 3 teams is going to win the NFC South and host a playoff game round 1, likely against the Dallas Cowboys. As of right now, looks like that's going to be the Atlanta Falcons, and I don't really mind that, honestly. I think Atlanta, when they're playing their game, they can be as dangerous as anybody, and I'm not even joking when I say that. I think for Atlanta, they need to really, if they want to beat the big boys in the NFC here, Detroit, San Fran, Philadelphia, obviously Dallas, if that's who they're playing in the first round, Atlanta's going to need to establish their run game and basically just live and die by that on offense. No disrespect to Desmond Ridder and Taylor Heineke for their contributions this year, but it should be clear to anybody who's watched the Falcons this year that with how well their offensive lines played, with how well Bijan Robinson's played when they've given him the ball, with how well Tyler Algiers played, you want to run the offense through those guys. And when they do that, they can beat some of these teams. Now, will their defense be able to hold up? Will they be able to adjust if a team like the Cowboys is stacking the box, expecting the run, and forcing Desmond Ridder to make plays? I don't know, but I do believe Atlanta is good enough to at the very least win this division. New Orleans isn't a bad team either. They are down Marshawn Lattimore right now, but he should be back by the end of the regular season. And New Orleans is probably the team I would say that has the best chance to take this spot from Atlanta. Although, as we can see, New Orleans plays Detroit this week, Tampa Bay plays Carolina, so if New Orleans loses, Tampa Bay wins. Maybe Tampa Bay has a better shot at it. We'll see when we go through the schedule, but all 3 of these teams have a fair crack at this number 4 spot, but right now, I wouldn't be surprised if Atlanta just hangs on to this. I really wouldn't, but we'll see when we go through the schedules in a second like we did with the AFC. So then looking at this wild card race, I think Dallas has pretty firmly cemented themselves as being at the very least the 5 seed here. I don't think they're going to fall down to 6 or lower. The only change I could see with Dallas is maybe if they're able to overtake Philadelphia for the NFC East crown, but even then they would need Philly to really go on a cold streak here, and Dallas still has some good teams they need to play themselves, so I wouldn't entirely count on that happening either. So Dallas could very well be locked into this number 5 seed, going on the road in the wild card round facing whoever comes out of the NFC South. Then for these last 2 wild card spots, some very fascinating stuff going on here. So right now it is the Minnesota Vikings and Seattle Seahawks. Minnesota, funny enough, here with a 6-6 record, despite the fact that they started off 0-3, and it looked like their season was left for dead earlier this year when Kirk Cousins is out for the year and Justin Jefferson goes on IR, and the defense really isn't that good, and they don't have much of a running game, and the offensive line's just kind of meh. Not really a lot to write home about this Minnesota Vikings roster, but under the tutelage of Coach Kevin O'Connell, they made Josh Dobbs look like this year's Geno Smith for a few weeks, just looking like the comeback player of the year, a quarterback who his career was kind of left for dead. He was kind of just seen as somebody the Arizona Cardinals were plugging in because they had to start somebody this year, but Minnesota picks him up. He plays well for a while, and the clock just struck midnight on his little moment in the spotlight there, and seems that reality's coming back in for this Vikings team. So we'll see in the coming weeks, because if Minnesota starts to go on a bit of a cold streak here, that would open the door for Green Bay or Los Angeles to jump into the playoff fold, both of whom have been playing pretty good ball as of late. And we have to mention Seattle as well, a playoff team from last year. And Seattle in terms of the talent they have and the execution that we've seen from them this year, they should be a playoff team. The issue is Seattle is in the middle of a pretty brutal stretch, a pretty brutal stretch on the schedule right now. And if they keep on dropping some of these games, they're already 6-6. So if they lose a couple more games, you're really just kind of daring the Packers and Rams to make a push here at that point. And if they really get into a cold streak, maybe even another one of these NFC South teams could sneak in as a wild card. But I kind of doubt that as of right now. We'll see how it all shakes out when we get there. Then finally, looking at our top three seeds here, we have the Detroit Lions at 8-3, likely winning the NFC North and likely your number 3 seed, although it is quite possible they could leapfrog the 49ers if they lose to the Eagles this week. And then we have to mention the heavyweight battle going on this week between the Eagles and 49ers. The Eagles sitting at 10-1, hosting the Niners at the Link this weekend in the NFC Championship rematch. That should be quite the spectacle. The 49ers with a win would still be the number 2 seed, but if the 49ers have any hopes of taking this 1 seed from the Eagles, they kind of need to win this Sunday. If the Niners lose, then you can pretty much pencil in Philly as the number 1 seed. So with that being said, let's look at this schedule for the rest of the NFC. Now, this is still, what's the right word here? Still saved, I suppose, from after we did the projections for the AFC. So the interconference matchups here in the center of the screen between the AFC and NFC will already be filled out. I will review them here as well, just for the sake of the NFC participating in those matchups, but the standings won't really be as fluid as we go through it like it was with the AFC week by week. So we'll start in week 13. We do know one of these results already. The Cowboys, of course, defeated the Seattle Seahawks on Thursday Night Football at home. And then looking at these interconference matchups, I believe Washington is going to lose at home to the Dolphins. Arizona will lose on the road to Pittsburgh. Atlanta will win on the road against the New York Jets. The Rams will win at home against the Cleveland Browns. And the Green Bay Packers will fall on Sunday Night Football to the Kansas City Chiefs at Lambeau Field. Then looking at these last 3 NFC matchups, I think the Detroit Lions on 10 days rest should fare well against the New Orleans Saints in the Superdome. The Tampa Bay Bucks should be able to handle the Carolina Panthers. And I'll say the Philadelphia Eagles get it done at home against the San Francisco 49ers. So moving on to week 14, we do have an interconference matchup between the Ravens and Rams. I believe the Ravens take that one coming off of their bye, and The Minnesota Vikings and the Minnesota Vikings and Las Vegas Raiders, excuse me, facing off, each coming out of their own bye weeks. And I think Minnesota will take that one on the road. So looking at the NFC matchups for Week 14, Atlanta versus Tampa Bay, that could be a big matchup for the NFC South. I think Atlanta will take that at home. If Atlanta can play their game, there's no reason they shouldn't be able to win this one. Then looking at Detroit and Chicago, Chicago coming off of the bye. This could be a sneaky close game. Chicago almost beat Detroit a few weeks back, but I will still give the Lions the benefit of the doubt for now. Although, if the Lions do start to have some more shaky performances, I'd definitely reconsider some of these picks. But as of right now, I still trust Detroit. They're definitely on my radar, though, in terms of they still kind of need to prove it to me that they're a legit contender. I know their record says that they should be, but I need to really see it from the Lions that they can go into another elite team's house and beat them, because that's probably what they're going to need to do in January. So moving along now, the Saints should defeat the Panthers at home. The Seahawks and the 49ers for the second time in 3 weeks, this time in Santa Clara. I think the Niners take it again. If they won at Seattle, I don't see any reason they wouldn't win at home as well. And then we have the Eagles and the Cowboys on Sunday night. And this will be a tough one. I think the Eagles will take this, but it will have ramifications for the following week. And then finally on Monday night, I'll give the Packers the nod over the Giants. So then in Week 15, our interconference matchups, the Browns over the Bears, the Lions over the Broncos, Vikings over the Bengals, and the Buffalo Bills over the Dallas Cowboys. And on the NFC side, I'll take the Falcons over the Carolina Panthers. The Bucks and the Packers, that could be a good one. I'll give it to... Man, I want to say Tampa Bay, but I feel like with Green Bay this time of year having the home field advantage, it's probably them. That's a close call. You know what? I'll give it to Tampa Bay just to keep them both relatively close in the standings. And then we have the Giants against the Saints. That one should go to the Saints. Same with the 49ers going into Arizona. Give that one to San Fran. Then we have Washington against the Rams. Even though Washington's coming off the bye, still like Sean McVay and company in that matchup. And then now this game between the Eagles and Seahawks will actually be flexed to Monday night, December 18th. And I'll give this one to the Seattle Seahawks. I know that might be seen as a bit of a odd pick, but you know what? The Eagles are coming off of some very, very difficult matchups against the Chiefs and Bills already, and now they're playing the 49ers this weekend. Next weekend, they're going on the road to Dallas, and then from Dallas, they're going on the road to Lumen Field in Seattle. So that'll be a tough environment. Seattle's going to need this one because I believe going into this matchup now, if they lose next weekend against the 49ers as well, that'll be 3 straight losses for them. Let's pull up Seattle's schedule real quick. So, yeah, week 12, or I'm sorry, they lost week 11 to the Rams too. So they're already on a 3-game losing skid as it is. And if they lose next week to the 49ers again, that'll make it 4. So I believe if that is the case, Seattle's finally coming home in week 15 against the Eagles. The Eagles on back-to-back road games, coming off of a brutal 5-game stretch. I'll give the nod to Seattle, and it really doesn't change too much for the Eagles in the playoff race. If they defeat San Francisco and Dallas, they should be in a pretty good spot. So now week 16, interconference matchups will go Jets over Commanders, Colts over Falcons, Seahawks over Titans, Jaguars over Bucks, Cowboys over Dolphins, and 49ers over Ravens. It's a pretty good slate of interconference games that week, I have to say. And then on the NFC side of things, we have the Saints against the Rams on a Thursday night. This could be a really good matchup. Both of these teams on the doorstep of a playoff position here. I'll give it to Sean McVay and the Rams at home. And then we have the Packers going to Carolina, give Green Bay the nod there. Detroit against Minnesota. Detroit should win this game. I'll give Detroit the nod, but like I said, if Detroit has some shaky performances in the next couple weeks here, very much on the table that they could lose one of those matchups to Minnesota. Then Arizona against Chicago. Give Chicago that one, get them to 5 wins, and then the Eagles and Giants on Christmas Day. Give that one to the Eagles. So then on to week 17. And looking at our interconference matchups, just 2 of them. We give them to each of the home teams. The Jaguars over the Panthers, pretty slam dunk pick there. And then the Seahawks over the Steelers. That one will definitely be a lot more competitive, at least on paper. Then on the NFC side of things, big Saturday matchup on December 30th between the Lions and Cowboys. And you know what? I'll give it to Dallas. Watching both of these teams play right now, especially down there in Arlington, Texas, Jerry World, if you will, I think the Cowboys will fare well against the Detroit Lions. Seems like they've really been playing well as of late. Dak Prescott's really coming into his own, and although as an Eagles fan, I would rather them not win this division. I have to say, just as an NFL fan, it is quite a shame for Dak Prescott because if the Cowboys were leading the NFC East right now, I think he's the slam dunk pick for MVP. I really do, because it's kind of wide open right now. We do have Jalen Hurts in the mix, Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes, of course, but really not one guy running away with it right now. So whoever has a strong performance in December could absolutely seize that award. So looking at these other matchups on New Year's Eve now, Eagles at home against the Cardinals, we'll take them. The Rams going on the road to MetLife Stadium against the Giants, we'll take the Rams. 49ers over the Commanders. Saints and Bucks, this could be a pretty important matchup in Tampa Bay, and I'll give that one to the Bucks. Then the Falcons against the Bears. Wow, the Bears could really play spoiler here for the Atlanta Falcons, and you know what? We'll be spicy here. We'll give this one to the Chicago Bears to really keep this NFC South in suspense. Oops, didn't mean to pull up Atlanta's schedule there. Then finally we have Green Bay against Minnesota to wrap up week 17, and this one could definitely be for a potential wildcard position as well. And you know what? I think Green Bay's trending in the right direction. I think they will finish the season strong. Whether that ends with a playoff berth, we will see, but to get there, they'll definitely have to defeat Minnesota. So then last week of the season, no interconference matchups. Take Tampa Bay over Carolina, Dallas over Washington. Although if Dallas is locked into this number 5 seed, it is quite possible Washington wins this one. And you know what? I will just give it to Washington to kind of just throw them a bone. Dallas will probably be resting their starters if this is how things shake out. Eagles against the Giants. Eagles already have the 1 seed wrapped up. We'll give it to the Giants. Vikings against the Lions. The Lions could still get the number 2 seed, so I won't say that Detroit would rest their starters in this scenario. And you know what, though? I will give it to the Vikings because they're going to need this matchup more than the Lions would. The Lions will still be either the 2 seed or the 3 seed, whereas the Vikings, this could be a matter of them either playing next week or maybe not playing next week. So we'll give it to the Vikings. Packers against the Bears. Oldest rivalry in football, we'll go with the Packers. Saints against the Falcons with the NFC South on the line in the Superdome. Man, you know what? I think for this one I gotta give it to the Saints. But you know what? Even then, the Falcons have a 5-1 divisional record, so it doesn't matter. The Atlanta Falcons would be your NFC South champions with an 8-9 record overall with a 5-1 divisional record. Then Seattle could take out Arizona in their house, and finally Rams at 49ers. 49ers with a potential 2 seed on the line as well. Rams with a potential playoff berth on the line, much like that Lions and Vikings matchup. And in this one, I think I'll go with the Rams. Yeah, because a loss would kick them out of the playoffs. I'll go with the Rams. So the Rams end up making it as the 6th seed ahead of the Seattle Seahawks. When all this shakes out, we have the Philadelphia Eagles as your 1 seed at 14-3, the 49ers as the 2nd seed at 12-5, Detroit Lions as the 3 seed at 12-5 as well, Atlanta as the 4th seed at 8-9, Dallas as the 5 seed at 11-6. Then, as we mentioned, the 2 NFC West teams, the Rams and Seahawks, at 10-7 respectively, making the postseason. So, looking at how the playoffs would shake out, our wildcard matchup would look like this, with the Atlanta Falcons hosting the Dallas Cowboys, the Detroit Lions hosting the Los Angeles Rams, and the 49ers hosting the Seattle Seahawks in the 2-7 matchup, much like last year. So I'll give the 49ers the nod over the Seahawks. I think that one's pretty obvious. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to disrespect Seattle like that. I'm not saying it was obvious like that, but any divisional matchup in the playoffs is not going to be an obvious win. But the 49ers do seem like a team that's on a mission this year. And I think out of these 3 matchups, that's probably the easiest one to call. Perhaps is how I should have phrased that. Then looking at these other 2 matchups, the Lions against the Rams, come back to that one. I'll give the Cowboys the nod over the Falcons. The Lions and Rams, I could get spicy here and say that the Rams upset the 49ers, but we'll give it to Detroit for now. Detroit's definitely on thin ice with me if you couldn't tell. We can pull up Detroit's schedule actually real quick because I do just want to go through this. Just looking at the competition they've played to this point at week 13, let's look at some of these wins here. So we'll go back from present day to the start of the season. Last week they lost on Thanksgiving to the Green Bay Packers. The week before they escaped barely with a divisional win against the Chicago Bears at home. The week before, coming off of their bye, they defeated the Los Angeles Chargers on the road. And before their bye week, it was the Las Vegas Raiders at home. Week 7, they lost pretty badly to the Baltimore Ravens, 38-6. The scores are kind of hidden under their logos here if you couldn't see them. Week 6, they defeated Tampa Bay. Week 5, Carolina. Week 4, Green Bay. Week 3, Atlanta. And, of course, Week 1, when everybody wanted to hand the Detroit Lions the Lombardi Trophy, playing the parade route, they defeated the Kansas City Chiefs without Chris Jones and Travis Kelce. So, yeah, looking at this Lions schedule here and who they've played, I know you can only play the teams on the schedule, but it does leave me a little concerned when you play a team like the Ravens and you get smacked 38-6, and then you play a team like Seattle who we're seeing lose big time games to big time opponents here in recent days, and they lost to them in week 2, 37-31. And there really isn't too much else here to be enthusiastic about. I mean, where are the big wins for the Detroit Lions, I suppose is what I should ask. You could say week 3 against Atlanta maybe. Week 10 against the Chargers, they won 41-38. Of course, week 1, 21-20 over the Chiefs, but looking at a lot of these matchups, this Lions defense just isn't there. So I've noticed when they play these more difficult opponents, like Seattle scores 37, Baltimore scores 38, and Los Angeles scores 38. What's going to happen when they get to the playoffs and they're going to play a team like even the Los Angeles Rams, let alone a team like the San Francisco 49ers? So as of right now, we'll give them the nod in the wild card round, but I definitely have my eye on Detroit. But in the divisional round, gotta give it to San Francisco, and Eagles Cowboys at the link. We'll go with the Eagles. So I do have then an Eagles 49ers rematch in the NFC Championship game, and I think it's got to go to the Eagles, especially if they win this Sunday at home against the 49ers. I have a hard time envisioning them losing to them in January. So that would then set up an Eagles-Bills Super Bowl that we just saw that matchup last week in Week 12. And I have to say, if this is how it shakes out, we could be in for a real treat. Because as we saw in the AFC video, for the Buffalo Bills, I have them winning out right now, which might be a bit of a hot take, but their schedule, while difficult, isn't insurmountable. They play the Chiefs, Cowboys, and Chargers as their next three. Then they get a bit of a breather with New England in Week 17 before playing Miami with the division on the line potentially in Week 18. And then Buffalo's road to the playoffs, they would go through. Let's go back to the wild card round here. They would go through, well, they would have a home matchup in the wild card round against the Houston Texans, go on the road to Duval in the divisional round to defeat the Jags, and then on the road in Arrowhead against the Chiefs in the conference championship game. So this run for the Buffalo Bills here would kind of mirror itself on either end. It starts with an Eagles loss, followed by a Chiefs win on the road, and I think that's how it's going to end, with a Chiefs win on the road, followed by an Eagles loss in the Super Bowl. So I guess you could call this my updated Super Bowl pick, but yeah, we'll go Eagles over Bills. If we could get that matchup between Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts on the game's greatest stage, that's just a treat for any football fan, especially with these teams playing as well as they might be playing if this is how the schedule shakes out. If Buffalo doesn't lose a game between now and the Super Bowl, this could be a very dangerous team coming in here. Same thing with the Eagles if they only lose to the Seattle Seahawks and a meaningless game against the Giants in Week 18. So that's what I have for the NFC. Love to hear what anybody out there thinks of these projections. Is this one a little more even-keeled than the AFC? No real off-the-wall projections like the Bills going on that massive run. A little more predictable on this side of things, but I think the NFC is the more predictable conference this year. You have the elite teams at the top, the Eagles, 49ers, and Cowboys, much like last year, and possibly Detroit, but not really too much beyond that. I don't think any of these other teams really are going to make serious noise in the playoffs. I do like what I've seen from the Rams as of late. I do think Atlanta can be a good team when they want to run the football. And Green Bay, I'm not writing off either. I think Jordan Love is really starting to come into his own and feel comfortable in that Matt LaFleur offense. So anything's on the table here really with the NFC still. And that's why I wanted to do this video now. We're at the start of December. Yeah, we have a general idea, but there's still so many different directions this thing could go. And much like when we did the preseason projections, injuries are still unfortunately very much on the table, still very much at large. Who could have seen guys like Joe Burrow, Aaron Rodgers, Deshaun Watson missing the season? It's been a tough year for quarterback injuries. So fingers crossed we don't have too many more major injuries the rest of the way. And yeah, look forward to watching these Week 13 matchups this week. It should be a really good one. Thank you to anybody who watched this, and look forward to some potential future content coming out soon. Talk to you guys in the next one. Thank you.